Hello. Hello, wonderful students. I'm going to talk to you today about paper. What? Specifically, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the different types of paper, why you use what when, how to understand some things you'll see on the labels of pads of paper, and then I'm going to show you 2 ways to get your paper smaller by tearing it or cutting it, and then I'm going to show you how to tape your paper down to boards. So you may know how to do all this stuff. If so, right on. But I found even when I think I know how to do something or I totally know how to do something and I listen to someone else explain it, sometimes I learn tips and things that make my processes easier. So I ask that you humor me and listen to this, even if you probably, or even if you already know all this. So hopefully you learned something new, and if not, thanks for your patience. So let's talk a little bit about paper type. You will have, for whichever class you're in, some paper. Sometimes the paper will come labeled like this, mixed media, and here they specify acrylic, watercolor, pen and pencil. So mixed media, wet and dry media. Things like acrylic, watercolor, they don't say ink here, you could use that. And this paper, this mixed media paper, tends to be, oh, where'd I put it? Aha, a little thicker. Listen to this. Right? It's got some heft to it. You can kind of see that here. So this is the mixed media paper. You can also see, I don't know if you can see on the video, but I'm telling you that it's here. This says 98 pounds or 160 grams per meter square. That's the weight of the paper. And that's a good way if, you know, any company can call any paper mixed media, or they'll say it's for wet media, but knowing the weight of paper really gives you a sense of what it does. In contrast, for example, this sketch pad is 50-pound paper. So let's look at that. A sheet of this business. Ooh, 2 sheets of this business. It's pretty thin. And I think of office paper as being about 60 pounds. So this would be less than that, although it feels about like office paper. But at any rate, here we are, sketch paper. This is good for dry media, pencil, charcoal, pastels maybe, but you can certainly use wet media on a thinner paper like this. You can do whatever you want, really, and I encourage you to, because experimenting, playing, effing up a little, that's how we learn stuff. It's also how we have a better time doing this work. So I'm going to tell you all these things. You don't have to use these specific papers, but you should know that because paper is made of fibers. When fibers get wet, they swell, and that's when, like if you've ever spilled water on a magazine, the pages buckle, and that's because the fibers are swelling. So when we do wet media on either of these papers, the fibers will swell, the paper will buckle a little, and then it'll dry flat, hopefully. And I'll show you at the end how to tape off the edges of your paper. That's one way that we can help paper dry flat. So we kind of say like, look, keep these edges here. If you use a heavier weight paper, like this mixed media kind, or a watercolor paper, or printmaking paper, it won't buckle as much because the paper's thicker, and when it dries, it'll be easier for it to dry flat. If you do something like this and use wet media, it'll buckle a little more. If you're using, say, an ink wash, the ink might pool and the pigments will be irregular, but it can still be really neat. So there's that. Heavier weight, poundage or grams per meter square, is going to be a thicker paper. And the thicker paper is, the better it can handle wetter media. So like a watercolor paper is going to be super thick. And if you want to dig down this rabbit hole or fall down this rabbit hole, you can spend as much money as you want on paper. But you can also find some really good options that are not super expensive. So, and hopefully that's what we'll be using in class. So that's a little bit about the 2 types of paper. I'm going to put this over here now. And now I'm going to show you 2 ways to get your paper smaller. Well, they both require a little measuring, sort of. In general, I try to avoid measuring if I can, just because it slows me down and it's not really where my head is when I'm making things. But in this case, both of these sheets are 18-inch by 24-inch. And so I want to get them down to 6-inch squares. One, because that's what we're going to use for our drawing project in the basic drawing class. And also because I know 18 is divisible by 6, 24 is divisible by 6. I can get 12 sheets out of this, right? 6, 6, 6. Yeah. So that's great. It's anytime I can figure out how to reduce waste and use up the whole sheet, that's good. So let's see, I'll do this thicker media first, and I'm going to show you how to tear it down, not using any kind of X-Acto knives or scissors. If you're in the printmaking class, the tradition is to tear down paper and not cut it. And that is because in printmaking, we use handmade paper that has what's called a deckled edge. It's this bumpy little bit. It's not a bug, it's a feature. This is a sign that it's a nicer paper, and it's something that people like to leave. Printmakers love their deckled edges. Here's the print. It's a little off. And this is for registration. I would later tear this off. So when we tear paper, we get an edge that looks similar to the deckled edge. So it's just an aesthetic thing. If you cut it off with an X-Acto, like I don't have the patience, I don't have the space, F this noise, that's fine. You don't have to do it this way, but you should know that that is the tradition. And I encourage you to try it. So actually we'll just do this one. I want to get margins that are mostly even, and I want to tear off this little bit right here. So let's do that. So I have this beautiful cutting mat here. If you don't have a cutting mat at home, you will need, or even if you do, you'll want a pencil and a ruler. So let's do this. So I see here I've got this margin's like an inch. These margins are less than an inch. Ideally, the margins all around the image would be the same size. Whatever, it's not ideal. We're gonna roll on. So what I'm gonna do is mark out an inch from this edge. I'm gonna put a dot and dot. And we work in pencil so we can erase these marks later. So a dot and a dot. And now I've got 4 dots, and that's plenty enough to find a straight line. We have in the print shop something called a tear bar. Bum, bum, bum. A tear bar is like a ruler, but it doesn't have any marks on it. It has this beveled edge. Some rulers, not this one, will be cork backed. And that's nice because the cork holds the paper down when you're cutting something. The tear bar, we don't want anything under it because we want this little edge to be flush to our paper. So I'm gonna put this down, and I'm gonna line up the tear bar on my little dots. And really, if I were being more careful, I would line this up on the grid, but I'm gonna trust my dots and not worry about the grid on here. All right, there we go. And then I'm gonna put pressure down on the tear bar or the ruler if you're using a ruler, and I'm gonna grab this edge, and this is key. I'm gonna pull upward or perpendicular to this line. So I'm gonna pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up, okay? Ta-da! If, for example, I were tearing a sheet of paper and I had it under my tear bar, or we'll use the ruler this time, just for example. Other nice thing about the tear bar is it's really heavy, so it already has a little weight built in. So in this case, using my ruler, if I pull up and I don't kind of keep that pressure upward, which keeps the tear right along the edge of the ruler, my tear can meander and I get these kind of irregular tears that it goes offline. Not what I want. So pulling upward is key. And one of the ways I think about it is, again, the sort of force of your tear is perpendicular to the ruler. So let's look at that again. Now we're going to tear down one of these sheets to our 6-inch squares. So again, if you are at home and don't have a beautiful cutting mat or something with a grid on it, you're just gonna throw your ruler on and mark some lines. So I'm gonna mark 6 inches here. And you may remember, so 6, 12, 18, and then I don't mark for 24. You may remember from geometry that you need 2 points to establish a line, but 3 points to establish a straight line. I think that's right. If not, those of you who know more about geometry, please feel free to correct me. But there it is on the record. So I've just marked 4 points this way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler down along those lines. If it's comfortable to you, you could trace a pencil line. I try and avoid that because then I have to deal with the pencil line later. I don't want to deal with things later. So I'm going to line this up. And again, I'm going to pull this paper upward like this. Up, up, up. And you can see I'm moving both my downward weight-bearing hand and my tearing hand. Up, up, up. Okay? Ooh, and I missed a corner. Whatever. We strive for good craft, but we don't sweat it if things are not perfect. Or we'd be sweating all the time. All right, so now I'm gonna do that again. And I'm gonna come up here. You see I move my hand up and tear, move down, tear, 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 boom. And after I get all these 6-inch strips, I'm gonna go back and tear them the other way. All right, so one more tear here. And probably by this one, you get the idea. If you do this and it doesn't go right, it's okay. It's your first time or your second time or whatever. It takes a little bit of practice. And when we're in printmaking class together, this is one of the first things we do, and people are like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. But why would you be embarrassed that you can't do something right the first time, right? You didn't come out of your mother's womb walking. It took you like years to get that right. Some of us are still working on it. All right, so now I'm gonna mark off 6 inches this way. Here we go, 6, 6, 12, 12. And I'm just marking on either side of the ruler, but I'm gonna do that again. Dink, 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 dink. Okay, so I think you've got the hang of tearing. So now I'm gonna do this one with a cutting tool. And just for simulating art at home, let's do it on a piece of cardboard. Because again, anytime you're cutting with a blade, you want to be doing it on some sort of cutting surface. Because people in your household will not be happy with you if you leave big gouges in their furniture or your own furniture. Let's take care of our things. All right, so I'm still going to line it up as I did before. I have a box cutter here. I don't know if you can see on the video, but this blade is effed up. It's old, it's not very sharp, it's got all sorts of paint and stuff on it. It's not ideal. So you should not use a blade like this. You should always use a fresh blade. And for paper, it's okay, but if you ever try and cut cardboard or mat board with a dull blade, it'll snag. And people who know will look at your stuff and be like, ooh, you did not use a fresh blade. I think I can make this work because the paper's so thin, but just now, I'm gonna say this like 8 times, it's not ideal. But it'll do the trick. So the most important thing when you're cutting with a blade is to not cut yourself. And I have a whole video on how to make an art school Band-Aid, which you should watch and know how to do, but try not to cut yourself. One of the ways we don't cut ourselves is you're gonna put your ruler down, you're gonna put your fingers down, and just take a second to be like, are my fingers hanging over the edge of the ruler? And if you're thinking, I'm not a dumbass, of course you're not, but we all make mistakes and we all get kind of into the moment, and especially if you're trying to do something at the last minute, that's when you'll cut yourself and bleed all over your work. So just take a second. My fingers are not hanging over, cool. And then the other thing, especially like I'm cutting through 4-ply of paper, I don't need to do that all in one fell swoop. So I'm just gonna come here and kind of chill out and make multiple cuts. Da, 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 da. And I see the paper pulling away as I cut through, but I'm not gonna rush it. And the last sheet needs a little more. So no snagged edges, not terrible. Now I've got some sheets there. So let's do this again. And you can see, well, I don't know what you can see on the video, but I did cut through the cardboard. Again, that's why we have the cardboard or the cutting mat. Whatever you've got, any sort of thing that can handle abuse of this kind. All right, so let's put this on here. And again, checking my fingers, cool. You're gonna start at the top. I like to start a little above the paper and go all the way past the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Who knows how many strokes you'll need to do, but you are not in a hurry, because just don't be in a hurry when you're cutting things. And maybe I'll get to this last one and just, whoop. All right, cool. So I have now a lovely stack of square paper. I'm going to not tear down this thicker paper because I think you get it at this point, but I am going to wrap this up by showing you how to tape down these to a board. And the reason to tape these down to a board is, especially with the thinner paper, it's going to hold the paper in place. So when you put ink or whatever on it, it'll swell, but it'll be more likely to flatten down and dry flat. The other reason to do this is that if you have beautiful little clean edges on your piece, it makes what's inside, in my opinion, look a little more polished. So if there's all sorts of beautiful chaos and marks and whatnot going on here, and then there are these edges on the outside, it's a kind of like, it seems more deliberate. It's easier to frame it if you try to do that. It just kind of helps with presentation. So there's the aesthetic reason, the way it looks, and then there's the functional reason that it helps it dry properly. And if you're like, I'm not using any wet media, I'm using dry media, it's still nice to do this, I think, because especially in our drawing class, I should not do this while I talk, you're gonna make a lot of these, and so you can just prep a board with like 6 of these, and then you're ready to roll, and you're not like looking for new paper. It's like, I got this, I go. I can't think of a good analogy right now, but yeah, you set it up and then you knock it down. All right, so gonna take my tape. I'd say one thing to try and do is get your edges even, and I'm gonna try and do like 1/4 of an inch of tape over the edge here. Just put that down. I am sort of frugal to a fault, and so sometimes when I pull this tape up, I'll try and reuse it, give it a shot. I think this tape is low tack, that's why it's painter's tape, which means that it'll be less likely to rip the paper when you take it up. It still could, but less likely than, say, packing tape. All right, let's see, I think I can get 6 of these on here. So, oh, maybe we could get a tape to do double duty. Let's try it. Okay. All right. So, ooh, this is maybe not the best use of my time. I'm abandoning that plan. It's too complicated, not worth it, just to save a piece of tape. All right, there. Okay, taping down there, 1/4 inch in. Taping down here, 1/4 inch in. Bump it a bump. And then a little bit more here. And I think these are even enough. I can do like this. Okay, one more piece, and then I've got 3 on a board. You will have, God willing, the creek don't rise, a drawing board for this class. And depending on logistics and what ends up happening with COVID and everything, you may not have a drawing board, in which case, cardboard. Cardboard's such a great material. It's ubiquitous, it is cheap, it's sturdy, it's a lovely brown color. All right, so there's 3 sheets of sketch paper taped off. I think for my next 3, I am gonna tear down some of this thicker paper and tape it up, but I'm not gonna do that for the demo because I am hoping you got what you needed from this. So again, thank you for your patience. I hope you learned something. If not, I hope you, either way, I hope you feel well prepared to do this. As always, please be in touch with me with any questions. It is literally my job to help you. It is also my great pleasure. So again, we talked about different paper types, how to tear down paper, how to cut paper, how to get it taped to boards, and I think that's plenty for now.